Hello, Laurie guest. Welcome to the DoingCXRight show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Stacy.
I was about to say welcome to being a guest, Laurie guest. I'm sure you've heard that before.
I have a few times. Married into that name. What are you going to do, right?
Yes, it's just so simple and easy the way customer experience should be.
Yeah, exactly. It helped me name my entire company.
There you go. Well, so I'm so happy you're here. And I want to start off with telling the audience, who are you? What do you do professionally?
Well, I'm a professional speaker and trainer and author, and my background was actually in healthcare. And about 30 years ago, I found out that speaking is actually a profession. You don't have to be famous to have good information to spread around. And so I started my own speaking company almost 30 years ago now, and what a ride it's been. I love it.
Oh, I love that. And I relate to that because I've started my career in speaking, I was in corporate life speaking for 25 years, and now I've been on my own speaking on stages and having a blast. So I get you. And the audience is going to get you even more so shortly. But tell me about you, a fun fact someone may not know.
Gosh, a fun fact. What a great question. Well, I am a board game fanatic. And in fact, I was once crowned a Monopoly tournament champion right here in my own state. So that's my fun fact I always like to share.
Well, we share in common because I traveled as a kid playing in backgammon tournaments overseas.
Oh, really? Oh, well, there you go.
Yes. So another fact, I get you. And my favorite question, my audience knows I ask every guest, 120 of them so far, is what would you tell younger Laurie if you could go back in time to your 20-year-old self that you know now that you didn't know then?
Well, there's actually two things I would tell her, one personal thing and one business thing. So I'm going to share them both.
Yes.
As the personal level, I would say lay off the fries. That's what I would say. The fries caught up to me. And that's my favorite food. And I'll be sitting in the McDonald's drive-thru going, but you just started Weight Watchers and you're getting fries, right? How many points is that, right? So that's my personal one. Laurie, lay off the fries. But on a serious note, from a business standpoint, I did not realize that my thoughts had value early enough in my career. So I think that if I had it to do all over again, I would be a bigger thought leader than I positioned myself for. I would trust that just because I had an idea that I'd never seen before, that that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And so I guess I would want listeners also to think about, to go boldly where you want to go, as opposed to waiting for someone else to give you the nod.
Go boldly. We're going to talk about that a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. So, all right. Well, let's get into customer experience and doing it right. What does that mean to you? Let's start there.
Okay. Well, to me, and there's so many words there's customer service, customer experience, all these words. To me, it comes down to one simple thing. Is the end user that you serve, and in this example, we'll call them customers, but we know they go by lots of different names, right? Patients, members, community. There are a lot of different words for it. But what it comes down to is, are they so happy with the way you treated them and the product that you delivered that they come back for more? And do they recommend you to others? To me, if you can master that and people keep coming back, reorder, revisit, refer, you're doing something right.
So let's talk about the central thesis of the 10-cent decision and how small changes can indeed lead to significant outcomes in business. Tell me about that.
Well, the background on the 10-cent decision is when I was a small girl, Midwest farmer's daughter, I sold sweet corn on the corner of Market and Gage. And my dad and my brother would fill up the truck with all the ears of corn. And then I got to stand there and sell them for $1 a bag. And my dad taught me really early on how to look people in the eye, how to treat them, how to remember their names, what we call customer service basics. But my favorite part of selling sweet corn was dropping those dimes into my little metal cash register. And I could hear the sound sound of the dimes hitting, and they had such value. A dime and a quarter really adds up. Now you fast forward by a whole bunch of years, and one day I'm walking down the sidewalk with my then 20-year-old son, Evan. We're on our way to get a cup of coffee, and there is a dime laying on the sidewalk. I see it. He sees it. Evan steps over the dime, doesn't even consider picking it up. And I said to him, Ev, did you not see that dime? He's like, yeah, I saw it. And I said, why didn't you pick it up? And wait for it. This is what he says. Wasn't worth it. Okay. He has to bend over at the waist to pick up a dime. And he says, wasn't worth it. And I say, how much does it have to be for it to be worth it? He said, at least $1. I was so intrigued. I started asking all of my audiences. I tell this story and then I'd say, by a show of hands, how many of you agree with Evan and it's not worth it? Most of the hands go up. I was absolutely shocked that they didn't see the value of a dime. And then I would say, do you realize that one thin dime doesn't have much value? Very similar to just smiling at a customer or just using a customer's name. It's a thin dime. But if we stack a whole bunch of dimes, we roll it up in a piece of paper, throw it in a pillowcase, it's a weapon. And that became the whole thesis of the book, is that little tiny things we do for customer service, for their expectation, for exceeding their expectation, they're all thin dimes until we start stacking them. And that's when I realized, oh, interesting. What about small change pays off? We just have to start stacking the little things. And that's what the book is about. All the little things you can do that cost you almost nothing, but make the biggest impact. So that's my shortest version of the synopsis, or the thesis, I should say, of the book. And it's all because my kid wouldn't bend over and pick a dime up.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. And I would say that even in your story that when you were younger, you were bold.
Yeah, yeah, always bold. Sometimes it doesn't always work in my favor, but it did back then.
Go bold or go
Yeah.
home. Isn't that
Yeah.
what our friend Shep Hyken says?
Yeah, exactly. And he knows.
He does know, yes. So, who's doing the 10-cent decision right? Are there any examples that come to mind?
Yeah, I do have a couple examples. In fact, I have one just from a few hours ago, and it is so fresh. I haven't even really thought the story through, but I'm going to take a risk. Stacey, I'm going to go boldly. I'm going to retell this story without any practice whatsoever. Here we go.
Good, good.
So my sister-in-law and I just took my father-in-law to a nephrology appointment. And I went because I have the medical background. I kind of do the translating of the big words and all that kind of stuff. And I prepared them ahead of time. We're seeing a specialist. So here's some things just to remind you guys. She's not going to have time for the long stories. Let's really stay focused on just this body part, and let's get our questions organized. And we need to be prepared for being pushed in and pushed out. That's just how it is when you see a specialist. And so we get there and we had the opposite experience of little things paying off. So very briefly, receptionist greeted us immediately and had everything organized and was so pleasant and asked a couple things about our comfort. Did we want something to drink? Those types of things made us feel comfortable. And then when the circulating nurse took us back to take the intake, she said twice, "You are going to love Dr. X." Like, we call that power positioning, right? She'd already prepared us to love this doctor. She goes, by the way, get all your questions ready, because get this, she will not leave the room until all your questions are answered. Now, she was also running a half hour behind, but all of a sudden my irritation about sitting for a half hour, which is my pet peeve in doctor's offices, it all of a sudden got erased because she was going to work through her lunch hour to answer all our questions. And sure enough, she showed up and she was everything that her staff promised she would be and more. I cannot recommend this doctor bigger than I'm recommending right now. I mean, she was just fabulous, and none of it cost her anything other than some attention to detail and some time. These are small dimes independently. They wouldn't be report worthy to you, but when you stack them all on top, it's the first thing that comes to my mind when you say, what am I talking about?
It's a great example, especially highlighting patient experience is a customer experience. I want to add on to your story. Today, I was at a doctor's office, and I have not
we have in
told this.
common, Stacy.
I mean,
Another thing.
it's ridiculous. So I have to share, and those that'll be watching this on YouTube will get to see this picture that I'm showing, but versus audio only. But what I'm sharing is it's a picture of a ceiling, and what happened was I had to get an exam done. And so there's flowers on the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I'm in this awkward position, my head is looking up at the ceiling so I can be distracted
Yep.
by the flowers on the ceiling. That's intentional design of an
Uh-huh.
experience. I love
Yes.
that. So, so,
Absolutely.
so as I'm leaving the doctor's office, he says, or I said, "Do you mind if I just take a picture of your wall, your ceiling?" And he looked at me like 10 heads. And I was just like, "Listen, I'm a blogger and content creator, and I just love that you have this distractor when I'm not feeling such love right now by this
Yes.
machine." So, yeah, so I love your story, and it's really about the intentional design of the experience for your patient and your guest.
And if we can start looking for these things, they're everywhere. So everyone who's listening to this podcast and is in business, every time they go to a restaurant, a hotel, a doctor's office, everywhere, they should look for what about this experience is making me feel report out worthy. We both had a short story from today that is
Yes.
worthy of talking about. That's what everybody should be striving for. And if we had nothing to report on our visits, then that's not good enough.
Being worthy to talk about.
Hmm.
Now, that can be in the other direction, of course,
Hmm.
worthy of talking about in a not a good way. So that's clearly why you need to be doing CX right with 10 cents decisions.
Hmm. Hmm. Because we have more fun talking in the negative. Again, if you and I are meeting over coffee as friends, the
Yeah.
odds are really good. I'm saying you will not believe what happened yesterday, and it's going to be a complaint. Would we be telling each other the stories we are right now if we were just friends meeting for coffee? I'm betting the odds are we'd talk in negative more than positive. That's just how we're
Yeah.
wired.
Well, speaking of that, since we're so in real time today, there's big news about service outages with AT&T and T
I
and some
heard about
service
that.
providers. All
Hmm.
right. So, since we are literally on the fly today, what's your perspective on doing CX right when things go really wrong with technology and service? And now all these people are affected.
Hmm.
I, I have a viewpoint, but I want to hear yours.
Right. Well, in this particular industry we're talking about, it's really tough because the impact, right? It just ripples like crazy from being able to do the job we're doing right now to even being able to contact each other just a few hours ago. So it's such a ripple effect in this industry. But my short answer would be they have to own it, not make excuses, right? They need to explain themselves. And they need to at least validate how we're feeling with any solution they can give. Now, I don't know enough about today's issue to give an opinion, but on a brief jaunt away from this, I made a mistake earlier this week with a client. And it's the first time in a long time I made a really big mistake and I had an angry client. And I had to do what I'm talking about right now. I had excuses. I have reasons why the mistake happened, but I did not go that way. I owned it. And I wrote back and said, I'm as disappointed in me as you are. And here's how we're going to right the ship. So I gave no excuses. And after I did bullet, 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 here's what we're going to do. He came back with, thank you so much for the way you've handled this. I'm certainly not patting myself on the back, but what I'm saying is I tried to own the mistake. I couldn't unring the bell, but here's what
Yeah.
I can do to make it right. And I would want AT&T to follow that same mode if they have the ability to do so.
Yes. So I'm going to speak from an angle of I was an employee there for 12 years and I
Okay.
was an employee at Verizon for 5 years. And so I know what it's like inside, and holy, is that stressful.
Oh, right.
Um, but I also now speak as a customer, and I believe everything you just said in terms of what leaders can do. I want to add an extra flavor to this, which is we as customers have to own our experience. So we could sit here and be extremely irate and angry, right? But it's out of our control or consumer control. So take a breath and actually, obviously, you're angry and it's going to affect probably hospitals. And I mean, major businesses is huge. But I just say own your anger and own your frustration at the same time.
I think that's a great tip because they didn't do this on purpose. It isn't like a company sets out to make these big errors. Things are going to happen, and our reaction to them can make it worse or it can make it better. And have you ever been a person that you're extra kind to the one who's struggling and how much they appreciate it? The vendor appreciates it when you show the extra patience. When we sit in a restaurant and somebody's apologizing for how slow the service is, we're always like, no problem. We're completely like, don't worry about us. And you can just see the server relax that, okay, we've got a nice group of people at table 6, right? I like trying to be those people and think of it on their side of it.
Well, the best companies have been the ones that make us walk in each other's shoes.
Hmm.
And I remember being in an elevator industry, and I went on ride-alongs with elevator technicians.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
never been in my life, an elevator technician. So here I am with my hard hat, and I'm petite, and I went on the whole day walking in his shoes and learned what it's like, so that you're not just in that corporate headquarters, creating programs for people that you've never done their job.
Hmm. Hmm.
So empathy does come when you've been on the other side and can relate.
I think so. Exactly. And how often do we compliment people for good service? The answer is not often enough because that is their gasoline between paychecks. Right?
Yes.
Praise is
Yes.
gasoline between paychecks. They need to hear the praise, whether it come from the customer or internally. If I'm managing people, heck, if I'm even working next to you as my coworker, I can turn to you and say, Stacy, you just rocked with that person who was really angry. Way to rock it. And that refills you because that's what leads to people feeling burnout and down on work is they just don't feel like they're getting the praise and the applause where the criticisms are so much more magnified.
So you talk about service fatigue.
Hmm.
Can you explain more of that and how tactically leaders can prevent that?
Yes, I started studying this actually right before the pandemic. And then the pandemic magnified this. And the service fatigue is really a less than. It's the exhaustion that leaders and staff can feel, even customers can feel it when everything is falling short. Now, the difference, in my opinion, and I am making this up, there is not some study proving this. This is just my opinion. There is a difference between service fatigue and burnout and stress. They're cousins, but they are not the exact same thing. On
Yeah.
the burnout and stress outside, we physically show that. So we might look down. We might have it impact our health. It may impact our ability to get out of bed and go to work. It is completely stopping us from doing our job, or I shouldn't say completely, it's hindering us. With service fatigue, we're still doing the job. On the outside, we look put together, we're getting it done, but instead there is not the dedication to serving. We're not looking for the CX. We're just getting through the day. And so you can see that those are slightly different, which also means I think service fatigue can catch up to you. It can sneak up on you, and it can also sneak up on the managers who are trying to manage staff. So I really started digging into what do we do about it? What's the cause of service fatigue and what do we do about it became what I studied for the last couple years.
Hmm. So how do you measure this, whether it's the service fatigue? How do you even know that's happening?
I think you're going to know. I don't have an official way to monitor. It isn't like there's a test that can be taken, but I think what we're looking for is turnover. We're
Yeah.
looking for people that are showing signs of decreased customer service, yet not seeking any help for it. So they're not asking for more training. They are possibly starting to show up late for work. They're skipping out of work. They're starting to slide into that other description I gave of the burnout and stress. We've got to catch it when it first starts to appear. And I think falling short in our customer satisfaction is the number one indicator that something is slipping.
Hmm. What else have you learned in your research as you were putting together the 10-cent decision and formula? People listening, they're all different size companies.
Sure.
So, how do they apply this from where they sit?
Well, I'm finding that a lot of people are applying it to my number one thing I talk about is the boundaries related to work. We know all about boundaries in your personal life. That's saying no to things. That's guarding your checkbook and your calendar. There's plenty written about that. But what about the boundaries at work, especially in organizations that are a 24/7 type operation? So I'm going to use the first example that comes to my mind. I do a lot of work with luxury travel advisors. And over time, they have positioned themselves as a 24/7 resource for you. So Stacy, you're on a trip to Italy. Something isn't going right. I'm your advisor. What are you doing? You're calling me in the middle of the night because something isn't going right. So because they've wired themselves to be 24/7, they don't stop working. They are constantly available to be contacted. That's going to lead to service fatigue because there is not a proper boundary. So what's a 10-cent small thing we can do to change it? And this sounds really simple, but I'm going to say it anyway. If I'm your travel advisor, when we first meet and I'm getting you all set up on your trip, when it's time for me to set an expectation, I might say something like, now, Stacy, I want to let you know, I consider myself your 911 call. So when you're on your trip, if something goes drastically wrong and you need me, even if it's in the middle of the night, please feel free to reach out. I'm here for you. Now, for all the rest of the things, my normal working hours are Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And I check my email at this time and this time. And I really save the after hours things for the true emergencies. So I hope that's something that works for you. Okay, now that sounded a little scripted because we're fake right now. This isn't real. But if I was really talking to you, I'd add some customized language to that. I would create a rapport with you. But the important thing is I'm setting the boundary. Call me when you need me, Stacy, during regular business hours, unless the house is on fire. That's the message I want you to hear. And even just doing that is going to help.
It'd be nice if doctors said that.
Yeah, but they won't.
That's really important.
Yes.
And the ones that do stand out, obviously.
Exactly. So I think that that's just one of the examples of, and it's a simple one, but it's the easiest one to share in a setting like this, is what can a listener take action on right now is I'd like everybody to start reviewing their boundaries. If you've put yourself in position that you can be contacted anytime by anybody, including your workforce, you're going to struggle with service fatigue. Another brief example just popped in my head. I was recently at an event in a hotel, and I got there the night before to get this huge room set up for a special gamification thing we were doing. And there was one young staff person on board at the hotel, and they had put these fake decorations on every table that were going to be in my way. So I said to the young person, if it's all right with you, I'm going to take these silk plants and put them over here in the corner. And then in the morning, your team can put them where they want them. But for right now, I need the tables clean. And she said that was fine. About a half hour later, she comes back and she said, I just want to let you know, I called my manager and I told him he's lucky that I'm the one who's on shift because I handled this. And he said it was fine for you to put the silk plants on the floor. Okay, this is a perfect example. That manager got a call at home at 8 or 9 o'clock at night for something that was not necessary. So we might ask, why did she place the call? I think she placed the call so that he would know she's working hard. When she says, I told him, you're so lucky that I'm the one who's on shift, that's about her. That's not about me, the customer. It's not about whether the plants went in the right spot. It was the wrong thing to call the manager about, at least in my opinion. That's an example of a boundary that's being broken by the team member to the manager, leading to his or her service fatigue as a manager. Because I think it was a gentleman. He's at home saying to his family, I cannot believe she just called me about that. That's what I'm guessing.
So a lot of what you talked about is very much about human behaviors and human feelings and examples. Well, we know the big word of the year or years, AI and emerging technology. So where does that come in to service fatigue? Does it does it help reduce service fatigue and the 10 cents decisions?
Well, that is an excellent question. I don't know if I've given that some thought, so I will do that answer on the fly. I think that when AI, as a customer, if AI can serve my needs, fantastic. I think we love automation, but we like automation with a human touch. What that means is I like automation until I can't get my answers. So think, who would I? Well, I'll use Verizon as an example. You mentioned them earlier. That's my carrier. If I call Verizon and can get an answer from a robot or somehow an AI generated bot that gives me the correct answer to what I need, I'm pleased because I didn't wait on hold and I got the answer I needed. But the second that the robot doesn't really have the ability to answer what I need, you can bet I want a human on the other end who's going to answer quickly and be kind and be patient and give me the answer that I need. I just have trouble believing that AI can replace excellent human interaction. It's just hard for me to imagine, but I've been surprised at what it can do so far.
Yeah. When you talk about service fatigue, I'm actually realizing it's not just the customer has service fatigue, it's also internal. The customer service agents, they have such fatigue and obviously high attrition.
Yes.
So there's a dual meaning to service fatigue.
For sure. And I look at it as also dual solutions because there are some things we can change in how we serve our customers, but there might be even more things we can change on the inside. So for example, there's 6 things that I look at with the service fatigue, but one of them internally is craving joy. What's the joy in what we do again? I think you and I are really lucky because we have found ourselves in a job that I think we both really enjoy. I'm guessing we both jump out of bed in the morning ready to go take on the next challenge. And we have a lot
Yes.
of autonomy in the decisions that we make. But a lot of people listening might not have that situation, right? So they feel much more, it's the same old thing. Got to get up and make the donuts, right? Got to get up and do this over and over again. How do we change it up? We create joy in the atmosphere where we work. And what does that look like? Well, it's different for all kinds of places. So I started doing polling of what do you do for joy? I got everything from, casual Fridays bring joy to potluck birthday days to no meeting Mondays. No meat Monday, get it? MEET, no meat Monday. I love that one. And so that I get rest from these endless meetings that we're doing and I get to put my head down and work on some project that I have at my desk. These are all things that put joy back in the job and we have more control over that than we realize, in my opinion.
I'm smiling here because I wrote an article about JOMO, the joy of missing out.
Yes, love it.
There's FOMO, right? The fear of missing out.
Right.
And I'm talking about joy of missing out. Does that
Yes.
resonate?
Yes, absolutely. And what's something that pops in your head when you think about the joy of missing out? What's the first thing that pops in your head for this conversation?
Oh, wow, a lot. I would say from in a work context, and especially in corporate life, that there are so, as you said, so many meetings.
Oh,
And sometimes I remember I would see my colleagues in a conference room where it was glass, so you could see right through the meetings.
uh-huh.
And I was not invited to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember feeling so excluded and feeling bad. And then some friends would come out of that meeting and they would tell me what I missed. And that's where I learned about JOMO because now I don't own the company
Yeah.
and I get to go to sleep at night and not have to worry about some of the stress that was in that room. But if
Mhm.
initially you feel left out.
Right. I get that. That's
So
a great example. And most of the time, the meetings, I always liked how it felt to be in the know. I love knowing what's going on from the top down. But I also think when you're in those meetings, you run the risk of saying something, at least with me, my mouth's always going. So run the risk of saying something that I shouldn't or being delegated a task that I don't have time for. At least if you're on the other side of the glass, you're exempt from the joy of those two things, right?
yes, absolutely. So I learned a lot about FOMO and JOMO.
I love it.
and
That's very
and
creative.
social media is absolutely where you have to really build JOMO because you see how much you're not invited to or what it looks like people are really having fun and happy and we know the truth at many
Have
times.
you ever gone to an event and then seen that event later on social media and you'd be like, oh, wow, yeah, that was the 30-second highlight of the evening and that's what made her real, right? I always think that to myself. If people could see the whole story, it really helps with scroll and envy, I think.
It does. And I think there's a lesson here in customer experience,
Mhm.
which is it's not about that little glimpse of what you did to check the box. right? That goes, public from your PR efforts. It's the
Hmm.
entire experience that is real. And I think there's a correlation to what we're speaking about.
Absolutely. And it's the entire experience. In my session, I put up a picture that was taken in a car wash, and it was a snap second where the light was refracting off the windshield just perfectly. And the colors are gorgeous, magenta, green, it's pink. They're really pretty colors. And I always say this is a moment in the car wash because 2 seconds later, it didn't look anything like that. As soon as the car moved forward out of that beam of light, it was muddy, dirty water. And I think it's a perfect metaphor for what I'm talking about, is that there is a snapshot in time, and that can be what we remember. Oh, I had a really good experience, like the example I gave earlier about the doctor. Or it could be everything was great, and then the moment at checkout was really bad in some way. And that's the one we're talking about, is that muddy experience. And so as companies think about from the moment they put their hands on keyboard to search us till the moment they're leaving, whatever that looks like in your organization, has every step of the way been this beautiful moment, or has there been some mud I had to get through? And I think that's an interesting way to kind of break down the visit, whatever that may be, into chunks. Where can we improve?
Yeah. In fact, I have a book coming out, a co-authored book this year, and it's all about journey management.
Oh, good.
And and this is it. This is it. It's the holistic piece
Mm-hmm.
of it. It's not just journey mapping.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much bigger than that. So whether it's, the front desk as you described, whether it's the picture on the ceiling that I got to look at, it's all intentional. And that's what I hope people take away is through that journey, all these 10-cent decisions and intelligence around that you really get to choose how you want to show up and how you want people to experience your brand.
And I think the hardest part is a lot of people think that customer service is common sense. And the fact of the matter is, there is no such thing as common sense. Everybody who works for you comes from a different background. They were raised in different homes. They have different values. They have a previous job, most likely, where there was an example of what a great service or not great service looks like. All of that goes into how we treat our customer. And if it was common sense, neither one of us would have jobs because everybody'd be doing it right. But instead, we have to work really hard to make it a consistent and recognizable effort by everyone on the team, not just the first person or the last person we encounter. So the journey thing is brilliant. I'll look forward to reading that.
Yeah, thank you. And interesting, you just talked about. I had a gentleman, a really smart guy from Brandeis, a professor, Andy Malinsky, and he was on my show today. And we talked about culture intelligence. And the
Mm-hmm.
world talks about emotional intelligence, but culture intelligence, fascinating. I had not heard that word in that way. But
Mm-hmm.
you think about it, it correlates to so much what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I asked him his opinion, and I'm curious of yours. When you talk about culture, and we know culture drives that customer experience, they go hand in hand. There's a lot of views around diversity, equity, inclusion, and
Mm-hmm.
DEI is losing its power these days. I don't know why. So, what does that have to do with service fatigue, 10 cents decisions? Is there a link in your perspective?
I have never linked the two together, most importantly, because I am nowhere near a DEI expert. I have so much to learn in my own right that I have never included that with my material. I feel like we need to earn the right to talk about something. However, the reason I feel like it losing its power is a well well put together phrase. And I'm curious about why that is. The only thing that pops in my head is that anything that you hear a lot about over and over and over again begins to wear down. And we can throw in any other words in place of DEI, and the same thing is true. Will we eventually see the same thing with AI? I think we will. People will stop. It won't be edgy and interesting anymore and new and fresh. It'll be whatever the next thing is. And I think we come up with all different topics. Same way with, I know another one that pops up, generational differences. Remember when that was huge? Everybody was talking about knowing the generational impact in your, I don't hear about that anymore. There's some really amazing speakers on that topic. I know they still get booked to talk about it, but it's not something we're hearing about on podcasts and on the news and that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering if that's part of it.
How about quiet quitting?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
lost
that's
its,
exactly.
that was everywhere. And now you don't really hear about it. There's other words for it, but
And I
but
think that's the power of words. Same way as you're talking about this culture thing. This is a very interesting phrase. It is the first time I've heard it as well, making a mental note to look that up a little bit, because again, we hear an interesting phrase and we go, oh, that's different. Let me check on that. And then it becomes less different over time.
exactly. That's why,
Mhm.
I'll have to share that episode. It was really interesting today. A lot happened today between
I
your world
guess.
and my world today.
You with the flowers and me with the long walk that almost missed my podcast.
Yeah. Yes. Well, last thing about this topic of fatigue is, you said service fatigue, but you're making me think about word fatigue. And
Yeah.
we need to really think about that in how we talk to customers and talk to our staff. Because
Mhm.
if you are redundant and there is this fatigue, you will lose traction.
You will. And also, you need to be believable on any word that you use. In other words, have you ever received the recording that says something along the lines of, we care about you? It's on the recorded line, yet I'm on hold forever. Like,
Yes.
those words don't have, I don't believe you. So trust goes down because you're saying words, but you don't really mean them. And I think that's in this same idea of word fatigue. I can think of several examples where you're like, yeah, okay, my business is important to you. I think that's word fatigue.
Yeah, I love this topic. We could have spent the whole time together on fatigue of everything. But I will tell you, my favorite author, who wrote the Four Agreements, he talks about being impeccable with your words, and that is absolutely correlated, so that there is no fatigue and losing trust. Another topic, different day. As we're getting to the end here, told you it goes fast.
Yes.
I want to know from you leadership. We
Hmm.
know that there is no customer experience, there is no employee and staff experience if you don't have good leaders. And we also know that leaders are often thrown into the roles and have no support, which is not a good experience.
Hmm.
So, what is your perspective, the best advice about leadership, either given to you or that you gave to someone else that stands out?
I think the best advice I ever got that took me by surprise was when my boss said, surround yourself with people who can do your job better than you can. I love that because
Mm.
I was shocked. I think as a leader, aren't I supposed to be the one with the most knowledge, with the most talent, with the most fill in the blank, and everybody else is under me? That was when I was a young leader. And then I realized, oh my gosh, if I can hire somebody to be my right-hand person who actually can totally do my job when I'm not here, well, we go full circle to where we started in this conversation. It allows me to have some boundaries. I can take a vacation and know that Stacy's got it in good hands while I'm gone. And I can clock out at 5 o'clock and be gone until Monday at 8 a.m. And I can lead a life that refills me so I can come back and take care of our customers and take care of each other. He was absolutely right. And it was a very important lesson to learn early on. Surround yourself with people who can do your job better than you can.
I agree with you. Reality is, in my corporate lifetime, that people don't always have your back.
Mm,
So it's very hard to implement that with trust, that people are not going to sabotage you or just exclude you or not respect the boundary.
mm-hmm,
There's different agendas. So you really
mm-hmm.
have to have a very strong team and trust.
And I hope that's what everybody works towards. If I've hired you and I do not feel that we've got trust going, then I'm going to dig into that a little further. What's that about? Is that about me? Is it about you? Likely it's about us. I'm going to put everything I can into building that trust really early on. Now, if you and I have already worked together for 10 years before I have that leadership position over you and I'm trying to get you to comply with how I want to do, that's a very different story. But if I build it from the ground up, I'm hoping I build that trust and camaraderie between the two of us from day one when I brought you on board.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Love that advice. What do you want people to remember from today? If there was one takeaway, what would you say that is?
That the small ideas stack up. And that you don't need some big, huge, expensive renovation or a brand new brand or something like that. You can start with small things that cost you hardly anything, but stacked on top and delivered with consistency is going to make a big change.
Hmm. And you talk about change. I mean, every company I know is going through transformation. So, how relevant is that? Make your 10-cent decisions. It doesn't have to be where you bought a $1 million platform technology. Like start small and start building, and especially for entrepreneurs, because that's not easy either.
Right. Well, people will be surprised if they read the book, The 10-Cent Decision, how small. We have case studies in there, things that people have done that were very small, but you can see what the impact is. And it might get ideas going because it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference.
Can you give us one that stands out, one of your favorite
Yeah.
studies or
Yeah,
findings?
absolutely. One of my favorite recent examples that's actually not even in the book, but it's one of my favorite ones, is that we did some secret shopping for a very large cosmetic class. They did plastic surgery, facelifts, and that kind of thing. And they wanted us to pretend to be a patient from beginning to end, short of having treatment. And what we found is that they had a blockade when it came to their paperwork. So long story short, they were asking questions they didn't need. They were throwing in blockades because anytime I give you indecision, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Anytime I give you so many choices that I put you in indecision, that's a blockade to moving forward. And there was at least a third of the paperwork that they didn't need. It's just that the system that they bought automatically is asking for things. So by going through it and saying, you don't need this, you don't need this, there was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 things when taken out of asking our shopper for these things allowed her to convert faster into being a new patient. And it didn't cost them anything except the time to figure out what needed to be eliminated from the template. Easy peasy, no cost. It just took a little concentration.
Great example.
Mhm.
Well, I know people are going to want to find you. I will share you in the show notes. And I love your perspective and really want people to pay attention to all the points about, I call it crawl, walk, run. It's 10 cents decisions and being aware of fatigue in service, in delivery, and how you show up. And those are really important lessons for business and life, I would say.
Yes, exactly. Well, thanks for having me. We could talk customer service all day, but I appreciate those who took the time to listen to us, and hopefully we've given them something to think about.
Absolutely. And thank you for being here. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.